In the autumn of 1552, one of the world's most powerful empires unleashed a massive army to crush a small, defiant castle in northern Hungary. Smoke filled the air as the ground trembled beneath an Ottoman force of 35,000 to 40,000 men. Inside the fortress of Eger, barely 2,000 defenders, soldiers, peasants, and women prepared to face impossible odds, outnumbered nearly 17 to 1. For 39 brutal days, they resisted with a ferocity that stunned an empire. What followed became one of history's greatest underdog victories, an extraordinary stand where ordinary people held the line and forged a triumph that would define a nation. The year 1552 found Hungary in a state of near total collapse, a fractured land caught in the crossfire of giants. Just a quarter century earlier, in 1526, the Hungarian army was shattered at the Battle of Mohács, a cataclysmic event that saw the death of King Louis II and the end of Hungary as a unified, independent kingdom. In the decades that followed, the country was gradually torn in three. The west and north fell to the Austrian Habsburgs, led by King Ferdinand I. The central part, including the historic capital of Buda, was absorbed into the expanding Ottoman Empire, ruled by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. And in the east, a semi-autonomous kingdom emerged under John Zapolya and his successors, who swore fealty to the Sultan. This fractured landscape was a playground for political intrigue and constant warfare. The fall of Buda in 1541 was a devastating psychological blow, placing the heart of the Old Kingdom firmly in Ottoman hands. From there, the Turks launched relentless campaigns, pushing their borders ever outward. Christian forts began to fall one by one. In the 1552 campaign alone, the Ottomans had already captured Veszprém, Temesvar, Szolnok, Drégé, and Lipa, among others. The loss of these strongholds was often blamed on foreign mercenaries who lacked the motivation to fight for a land that wasn't their own. As the two great Ottoman armies, one led by Kara Ahmed Pasha, the second vizier, and the other by Hadim Ali Pasha of Buda, crushed all opposition, they eventually united, their sights set on a new target, the castle of Eger. Eger wasn't just another fortress. It was the gateway to Upper Hungary. It guarded the routes to the wealthy northern mining towns, which supplied the kingdom with gold and silver. If Eger fell, the path to Kassa, modern-day Kosice, and, more alarmingly, the westward route toward Vienna would be wide open. The castle's strategic importance could not be overstated. It was the last major obstacle in the Ottoman war machine's path. The Ottoman strategy was a well-oiled machine of conquest: surround, bombard, and offer a choice between surrender or annihilation. The fate of those who resisted was well known. Some Hungarian officers at other fallen forts were skinned alive. This was the terror that preceded the army. So, when national tradition holds that Captain István Dobo of Eger was ordered to evacuate the castle, his decision to stay and fight was a profound act of defiance. He was choosing to draw a line, knowing the horrific consequences of failure. In a kingdom exhausted by defeat, Eger was where Hungary would make its stand. Inside Eger's walls, preparing to face the Ottoman Empire, was not a professional army, but a motley crew of 2,100 to 2,300 people. This small force was a mix of hardened soldiers, armed peasants, townspeople, and a few dozen women who would prove as vital as any soldier. They weren't fighting for pay or a distant king. They were fighting for their homes and families. Leading them was Captain István Dobo. Born to a noble family, Dobo was a man forged in the turbulent decades after Mohács. A seasoned soldier and pragmatist, he had consistently sided with the Habsburg king Ferdinand I. Appointed captain of Eger in 1548, he immediately began strengthening the aging fortress, enlarging the garrison, and stockpiling supplies. He wasn't a man for grand speeches, but his quiet, unwavering resolve inspired loyalty. While others saw a hopeless fight, Dobo prepared for victory. At his side was a man whose genius would become legendary, Gergely Bornemissa. A young officer, Bornemissa's true talent lay not in conventional warfare, but in explosives. An educated and inventive mind, he turned the castle's workshops into a lab for creating terrifying and effective improvised weapons. He was the perfect complement to Dobo's steady leadership, a mad inventor in the face of overwhelming force. The garrison itself was a patchwork. It included professional Hungarian soldiers, local peasants who had fled the countryside, and, crucially, 6 German cannon masters hired by Dobo to make the most of Eger's limited artillery. This small group of foreign mercenaries was a rare exception in a defense defined by its local character. And then there were the women. From the start, the women of Eger weren't passive victims. They were an integral part of the defense, tending to the wounded, carrying ammunition and water, and putting out the constant fires sparked by Ottoman cannons. Their presence was a testament to the stakes. This was a struggle for total survival. Legend says Dobo declared, "I need men. Better a few lions than many rabbits." In the end, he got both lions and lionesses, a community bound by a shared determination to hold the line. On September 9th, 1552, the horizon darkened. The combined Ottoman armies of Kara Ahmed Pasha and Hadim Ali Pasha descended upon Eger, a terrifying river of men and steel. While romanticized accounts claimed a force of up to 200,000, modern historians place the number at a more realistic, yet still overwhelming, 35,000 to 40,000 soldiers. This was a massive army by any standard, a force that had rolled over every obstacle in its path. At its core were the Janissaries, the Sultan's elite slave soldiers. Taken as boys from Christian families, they were raised as devout Muslims and trained for a single purpose: war. Armed with state-of-the-art muskets, they were Europe's first modern standing army. Thousands of these elite troops were present at Eger. Supporting them was a formidable artillery corps. Some accounts state the Ottomans brought 16 massive siege cannons, or zarbuzans, along with 150 smaller pieces. The logistics were staggering, with some sources mentioning 2,000 camels hauling wood for siege platforms and tunnels. The army was commanded by 2 powerful pashas, a fact that proved to be both a strength and a weakness. Kara Ahmed Pasha was the second vizier, a high-ranking commander in the empire. Hadim Ali Pasha was the governor of Buda, seasoned on the Hungarian front. However, a significant rivalry simmered between them, which reportedly led to a lack of coordinated strategy at critical moments. Ali Pasha, an artillery expert, managed to inflict major damage on the walls, but this success wasn't always followed up effectively by the infantry under Ahmed Pasha's command. The army's arrival was a spectacle of intimidation. The vast encampment that sprung up around Eger was a city in itself. The defenders on the walls looked down upon a sea of tents, thousands of horses, and the disciplined movements of an army that had rarely known defeat. The psychological pressure was immense. As the Ottomans began to dig their trenches and position their cannons just beyond the range of Eger's smaller guns, the message was clear: the storm had arrived. The first few days after the Ottoman army's arrival were deceptively quiet. Then, around mid-September, the quiet shattered. The Ottoman cannons opened fire, and a relentless storm of iron began to rain down on the castle walls. Ali Pasha's artillery, strategically placed just outside the range of Eger's smaller guns, began a systematic bombardment designed to pulverize the fortifications and break the defenders' morale. Day and night, the barrage continued. The thunder of the cannons was a constant, deafening roar. Dust and smoke filled the air, choking the defenders. In the first week alone, hundreds of cannonballs slammed into the ancient stone. Over the course of the 39-day siege, it's estimated that nearly 12,000 cannonballs were fired at the castle. Inside, the defenders endured what we'd now call shell shock. Yet under István Dobó's command, they didn't break. Their response was disciplined and defiant. During the day, they huddled behind the ramparts. At night, when the bombardment sometimes lessened, the entire garrison, soldiers, peasants, and women, swarmed the damaged walls. Working by torchlight, they repaired breaches with earth, wood, stone, and anything else they could find, racing to patch the wounds of their fortress before the next assault. The Ottomans soon launched their first major ground assault. The elite Janissaries advanced in their signature terrifying silence, a tactic designed to unnerve their opponents. But the Hungarians, prepared by Dobó, held their ground. As the Janissaries reached the walls and raised their ladders, the defenders unleashed a furious volley of musket fire, arrows, and stones. The first wave was repelled, and then the next. Dobó's leadership was crucial. He was everywhere, directing repairs, organizing defenses, and instilling his own resolve into his troops. This was a battle of wills as much as walls. The Hungarians' cannons may have been smaller, but their spirit did not waver. They couldn't silence the enemy's guns, so they simply absorbed the punishment and rebuilt. The walls of Eger were crumbling, but the will of its defenders was turning to steel. While cannons thundered above ground, a second, more insidious battle was fought in the darkness below. Frustrated by the defenders' resilience, the Ottomans turned to one of their most terrifying tactics: mining. Engineers began digging long, narrow tunnels toward the foundations of Eger's walls, planning to pack them with gunpowder and detonate them, collapsing entire sections of the fortifications. This underground war was a slow, nerve-wracking affair. Inside the castle, sentinels used classic 16th century detection methods, placing bowls of water or peas on a drum, watching for the slightest tremor that would betray the digger's location. This is where Gergely Bornemisa, Dobó's brilliant lieutenant, came into his own. When a tunnel was detected, Bornemisa would orchestrate a countermine. The ensuing combat was claustrophobic and brutal, fought in near-total darkness. But Bornemisa's true genius lay in his use of explosives. He transformed the castle's workshops into a primitive munitions factory. He devised grenades from clay pots, filling them with gunpowder and shrapnel. He created larger bombs that could be rolled at attackers. But his secret was fire. He loaded his weapons with oil and sulfur, ensuring they would shower the enemy with a burning rain. His most legendary invention was a weapon born of pure creativity, a large watermill wheel packed with gunpowder and incendiary materials. During one intense assault, his men lit the fuse and rolled this massive, fiery wheel of death down into the tightly packed Ottoman ranks. The effect was devastating, causing not only horrific casualties, but also mass panic. Bornemisa's inventions were a critical equalizer. They demoralized the Ottoman troops, who now faced a terrifying, unpredictable arsenal of fire and shrapnel. The underground war was a dirty, unseen part of the siege, but it was here, in the dark, that one man's ingenuity did much to level the playing field. As the siege dragged on, one of its most remarkable aspects came to the forefront: the active participation of women in combat. This wasn't a planned strategy, but a spontaneous necessity. With every assault, the number of male defenders dwindled. To hold the walls, everyone was needed, and the women of Eger rose to the occasion with a ferocity that stunned the attackers. During the final, all-out assaults, when Ottomans managed to raise ladders against the battered walls, the women joined the men on the ramparts. Armed with the tools of their daily lives, they poured cauldrons of boiling water, hot pitch, and molten lead down onto the climbers below. They hurled heavy stones and rubble, turning the base of the walls into a killing zone. The image of these women, fighting side by side with their husbands and fathers, became the most enduring symbol of the siege. Their contribution was far more than symbolic. In the brutal, close-quarters fighting, these improvised weapons were horrifically effective. Their actions were a crucial force multiplier at the most critical moments. The role of women as combatants was so shocking to the norms of the 16th century that it was noted with astonishment by chroniclers. One story told of a woman who, seeing her husband slain, picked up his sword and fought in his place. Another told of a young girl who hurled the stone that killed her mother back at the enemy. These accounts highlight the reality that women were shedding traditional roles to save their homes. The famous 19th century painting by Bertalan Székely, Az Egrinők, The Women of Eger, immortalized this moment. It depicts women in the thick of the fight, their faces grim with determination. The reality, however, was likely even grimmer. Historical accounts describe women driven by a ferocious will to survive, temporarily adopting behaviors usually condemned in their gender because the circumstances demanded it. They weren't just helpers, they were fighters. By early October, the fortress of Eger was a ruin. 30 days of bombardment had left the walls shattered. A massive explosion in a gunpowder storage tower had torn a huge gap in the defenses, a wound that left the castle dangerously exposed. The defenders were exhausted, their numbers down by an estimated 1/3. Food and gunpowder were perilously low. Sensing the defenders were on the brink, Kara Ahmed Pasha ordered a final, all-out assault. What followed was 2 days of the most brutal fighting of the siege. The Ottomans threw wave after wave of soldiers at the breaches. Janissaries charged forward, determined to finally overwhelm the depleted garrison. The fighting was hand-to-hand, a savage melee in the rubble of the broken walls. This was the moment where every element of Eger's defense converged. Istvan Dobo rallied his troops for one last stand. Gergely Bornemissa's inventions turned the breaches into infernos, and the women of Eger joined the battle in full force, raining stones and scalding liquids on the attackers. The defenders fought with the superhuman strength of desperation. For 2 days, the assaults continued, but the defenders refused to break. Each time the Ottomans gained a foothold, they were thrown back. The exhausted, blood-stained Hungarians fought with a ferocity that stunned the attackers. The Turkish soldiers, demoralized by the long siege, began to lose heart. Their own supplies were dwindling, and the onset of cold October rains promised a miserable winter campaign. Ottoman losses were heavy, with some estimates exceeding 8,000 men. Finally, after one last failed attack on October 13th, the Ottoman command reached its breaking point. On October 17th, 1552, the order was given. The great army of the Sultan abandoned the siege. On October 18th, beaten and humiliated, they began their long retreat. Against all conceivable odds, the defenders of Eger had held. They hadn't just survived, they had won. The withdrawal of the Ottoman army on October 18, 1552, left an astonishing scene. The fortress of Eger was a smoldering ruin, but it stood defiant. Inside, the surviving defenders had achieved one of the most improbable victories in military history. They had lost nearly 1/3 of their comrades, but had inflicted catastrophic losses on the enemy and held the line. The victory at Eger had immediate and profound consequences. It halted the Ottoman advance into northern Hungary for years, safeguarding the rich mining regions and shielding Habsburg territories. For the Hungarian people, living under the shadow of defeat, the news from Eger was a staggering morale boost. It became a symbol of resistance, a testament that the seemingly invincible Ottoman tide could be turned back, and it inspired future generations, including the defenders of Szegedvár in 1566. The heroes of the siege were rewarded, though their fates were complex. King Ferdinand granted István Dobo ownership of castles in Transylvania and appointed him voivode of the region. However, Dobo would later be accused of treason and imprisoned, his health broken by captivity. Gergely Bornemissa became the new commander of Eger, but was later ambushed, captured by the Ottomans, and hanged in Constantinople after refusing to betray his fortress's secrets. The story of the siege quickly passed into legend, immortalized in song and, most famously, in Géza Gardoni's 1899 novel, Egri Csillagok, Eclipse of the Crescent Moon. The novel became required reading for Hungarian schoolchildren and remains one of the country's most beloved literary works. The legend also gave birth to one of Hungary's most famous wines, Egri Bikaver, or bull's blood. The story goes that Dobo gave his soldiers red wine to boost their morale, and Ottoman spies reported that the Hungarians were drinking bull's blood to gain superhuman strength. While this is a myth, red grapes weren't widely cultivated there until after the Ottoman occupation. It has become inextricably linked with the fierce spirit of Eger's defenders. Today, the legacy of 1552 is alive in Eger. The castle, which would eventually fall to the Ottomans in 1596, before being recaptured, now stands as a national monument. Every day at exactly 1552, a cannon shot echoes from the castle walls, a tribute to the year of the Great Victory. The Siege of Eger is more than a historical event. It's a foundational story of Hungarian identity, an eternal reminder that the strength of a wall is nothing compared to the strength of the people defending it.